Number 10. Qin Shi Huang. Everybody remembers the first man to walk on the moon, first president, and everyone remembers their first kiss, right? Ooh, cringe, I remember mine. Ooh, man. Emperor Hong was the first, ruling from 220 BC to 210 BC. His name is well renowned in Chinese history. Builder of the Great Wall of China, united China's warring states, and too many tourists around the world know he's the guy who made the Terracotta Army. This dude was a baller, and if you're to go off by his appearance in Civilization 6, he wants to take all your wonders for himself. Usually the first aren't so great, but he was the first, and he was very powerful. The Terracotta Army is pretty cool. It's amazing how long that lasted. Number 9. Emperor Wu of Han. The 7th Emperor of the Han Dynasty, Emperor Wu of Han successfully ruled over China from 141 BC to 87 BC. He is best known for expanding Chinese territories. Emperor Wu was fond of art and poetry and promoted them avidly. He established the famous trade route between East and West known as the Silk Road. And he also defeated the nomadic, I'm going to try and pronounce this, Xiongnu tribes? Xiongnu tribes, we're gonna go with that, sorry guys. Emperor Wu was a follower of Confucianism and applied his doctrine as a code of ethics for running the empire. Through his ideology and effective governance, he unified the nation in real terms. Unifying the nation is going to be an underlying theme here for most of these guys. There was a lot of political strife happening over the years. Number 8. Emperor Wen of Sui. When you're the big bad dude in charge, it's a job that comes with benefits. Live in a beautiful palace, good food, servants, entertainment, wealth beyond your wildest dreams, and just living good. However, being emperor in ancient China came with certain fringe benefits, if you will. They practiced a practice that was the same as some well-collared shirted door-to-door folks in the Southwest. Mormons, you know what I'm talking about. Wives! Why do you have one when you can have many? I don't know about that. Every couple out there will agree with me when I say that, right? Because more husbands and wives is just a good thing. It makes things easier, right? No, they're probably gonna disagree with me. That's just what a lot of them did though. It was the times. Some weren't even wives, they were just concubines. However, Emperor Wen of Sui was different. He looked around him and said, nah, 2's enough for me. Having the willpower only to be awful to 2 women instead of 50. Nice. Number 7. Emperor Taizong Tang. Here's another one, somewhat nice guy. Emperor Taizong Tang is the kind of politician that you want. Someone who comes in after the previous administration, sees the problem, acknowledges the problem, and then actively tries to fix the problem. With the least amount of lying and campaigning, of course. Where's this guy when you need him, am I right? Tang understood the mistakes that the previous government had made and wanted to rectify this. Specifically, a lot of the peasantry were given more rights as he knew how powerful they could be if working together. This made him rather well liked and remembered for such. Power to the people. Number 6. Empress Wu Zeitan. Listen, this was before the year 2022, and they let a woman not just lead a country but a whole empire. Maybe we were progressive back then, I don't know. But what I do know is that she was not judged for being a woman, but for being a tough and excellent leader. Quite possibly one of the best, actually. She fought many wars to expand China's borders, and successfully. A lover of the arts and literature, some of which were created and are still around today. She is remembered as the only female emperor of China, but perhaps there should have been more. She's also seen as a female empowerment in the ancient world. A little bit of girl power for you. Girls can do it too. And don't you forget it. Number 5. Emperor Puyi, the last emperor of China. Things were looking okay for about 5 minutes before Puyi suffered the same fate as many other empires did at the turn of the century and shortly into the 20th century. Just take a look at Russia. Puyi was forced to abdicate his throne, but like many rich and powerful people in the world, they don't really get punished the same as you or I. Remember The Wolf of Wall Street? Couldn't believe the end of that movie. At first he got to keep a very handsome pension and was allowed to stay in the royal palace for 5 years before the new government decided that it was a little awkward to share a place with the former evicted tenant. It's a little strange, kind of like squatting. He then went on to do some shady dealings with the Imperial Japanese Army during their tour of Asia in the late 1930s. And by shady dealings and tour, he basically was put in control of a puppet Japanese state during their invasion of China and other parts of Asia. Basically, he just signed off on anything the Japanese told him to do. When it was all said and done, he spent some time in a communist jail where he deeply regretted his actions. And I'm sure they made him deeply regret his actions. You don't want to be there. Number 4. Genghis Khan. You might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, Chetty, I think you got that wrong. He wasn't the ruler of China, he was the Mongol dude, wasn't he? Well, my dear internet friends, Mongolia was more than just a weird divider between China and Russia like it is today. Yes, before the English discovered tea and spices, the largest and probably the most powerful was that of the Mongol Empire. And during this lengthy and bloody reign, Genghis found himself in the imperial throne. The Mongols couldn't be stopped. If it weren't for the samurai and a couple of bad typhoons, they might have got Japan too. The Mongol Empire stretched from some parts of Europe all the way to Korea and everything in between. They lived under what I would call a Darth Vader clause. Join us or find out who your daddy is. Number 3. Emperor Kangxi. Queen Elizabeth II, Emperor Kangxi, and how long I spend surfing the internet on the toilet. What do all these things have in common? Well, they all last for a very, very long time. I'll come out when I'm ready. Shout out to all the dudes who use their phones on the toilet. How you doing, boys? Love you. Emperor Kangxi is one of the longest reigns of any leader in history. That's tough to do in ancient times. Sure, we all love Her Majesty, and stay strong, Queen Elizabeth, I love you. But these are modern times. Sure, she might have been in some danger when the Germans were about, but she wasn't even queen then, so I don't think that counts. You have to imagine that for every friend the emperor has, there's 2 more with people with knives behind their backs. Enemy kingdoms, the peasants, your concubines, and their sons. Sometimes even your own administration wants you out. Or someone in it. He's more known for squashing rebellions and leaving China in a rather good place even after he was gone. Way to go, dude. Yeah, way to go. Right on. Number 2. Pirate Empress. When people talk about pirates, they think about Johnny Depp, the Caribbean, and the pirates that loomed about the part of the world during the golden age of piracy. However, piracy doesn't just mean nice beaches and palm trees. There's piracy all over the world. China was no different. However, what was different was Zhang Yisao, a woman who inherited a pirate empire from her late husband. She worked with it too. She expanded her husband's empire and became the Empress of the Seas. At one point, she commanded 24 ships personally and oversaw a force of 1,400 pirates. She unified other pirates to join her empire with a fleet estimated to be around 400 junks, which is a weird name for a boat, and up to 40,000 pirates, all loyal to the pirate queen. She engaged in combat with the East India Company, Portugal, and the Qing dynasty. Wow, that's actually kind of crazy. You learn a lot. You learn a lot here at Bumblebee. I'll tell you, you learn a lot here. Number 1. The chairman. Okay, I know. Not exactly an emperor either, but hear me out. Just hear me out. Emperor is a leader of an empire. What do empires do besides hunt down the treacherous Jedi? Star Wars Day. They expand, absorb, and assimilate places. Mao's China might have been a finger quote modern one, but China wasn't exactly sitting around. Specifically the Tibetan-Chinese conflict in the 50s, just an example. It wasn't exactly a war as it was so much as, hey, I don't really like what's going on over there. I'm just gonna go ahead and take that. Thanks. Now, does that sound like a republic or does that sound like imperialism? Mao was a powerful man and did a lot of naughty stuff in his time, and it would take all day for me to get there. But it counts. He's an emperor, it counts. Emperor of communism, the communist emperor. We'll go with that.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the Zanzwingdui ruins. These ruins, located in China's southwest province, may just provide archaeologists clues on their past. Very recently, this past year as a matter of fact, new artifacts were found, a total of 534 relics. These cultural staples made of bronze, gold, ivory, a couple of these relics have been turning heads and raising eyebrows. This 3,000-year-old bronze figure, for example, seems to be holding an ancient wine vessel, and this relic stands a little over 1 meter. These ruins were luckily discovered during a refurbishment of a primary school. The Sichuan Provincial Cultural Relics and Archaeology Research Institute found over 80 tombs, 60 ash pits, and 10 building zones, all of them dating back to the Western Zhou dynasty, so back around 770 BC. Researchers have been examining this site for a couple years now, and although the people of Shu left little to no detail on their culture, we're finding all these artifacts that tell us a story. Like for example, the 1-pound gold mask found in one of the 6 sacrificial pits. So we're getting there, one beautiful relic at a time.
Number 9, seahorses. Ancient Chinese medicine was kind of incredible. Honestly, they had like a kind of sixth sense when it came to how certain things might work. Some of them were pretty Questionable, I will say, I will not lie, but they had something right about seahorses. Even today, you can find seahorses at markets as a street snack, but beyond a tasty treat, they have been used as a part of Chinese medicine since time immemorial. It was believed that they had the potential to cure infertility, baldness, asthma, and arthritis. Research work on seahorses provided information that has the ability to help ease inflammatory symptoms associated with arthritis. A peptide derived from the seahorse species Hippocampus cuta proved to be effective towards chondrocyte cells, so they were kind of right. It did do something.
Number 8. Magic mirrors. Because of horror movies, it's hard for me to open and close a bathroom mirror. I can't do it. They always do it so slow in the movies as well. I'm like, ugh, just slam it. But in ancient China, mirrors were considered a good omen, actually. So much so that after a loved one passed, a mirror was often hung on the ceiling of the burial chambers, to prevent evil spirits from ruining your beauty sleep. If you encountered an evil spirit, the first place you would have to go is near one of these ancient mirrors. So when archaeologists found these 2,000-year-old ancient artifacts, one of these mirrors was still able to reflect images. The world's strongest Windex, there we go. We found more than 80 of these, so it's quite important back in the day. Inscriptions were also left on these mirrors as well, like family wealth, eternal joy, anything to preserve their memory. I would much rather have a giant mirror than a tombstone after I pass away, but it's gotta be a funhouse mirror, because any other mirror is scary. And also, I can't get my hands on these ones. They're slim pickings, only 80 of these.
Number 7, John Wen. This kind of gives off Anastasia vibes a little. A prince thought to be alive after he was destroyed in a fire. In 1402, the Ming capital of Nanjing, a fire was smoldering beneath political strife. The capital was invaded by the emperor's own uncle, Zhu Di. He later accused his own nephew of being corrupted and lying to the people. Finally, the storm that had been brewing for years erupted. A rebellion was launched by his uncle with the aim of getting rid of the emperor's ministers and for Di to take power. He destroyed the palace by fire while the emperor was still inside. 3 bodies were recovered from the wreckage, assumed to be the bodies of John Wen, his empress, and their eldest son. His uncle soon declared himself emperor, but the people believed that John Wen had escaped. Rumors that he smuggled out just in time and was living as a monk somewhere else in China circulated. His uncle tried to erase any trace of his legacy, but the people remembered, just kind of like Anastasia. Yeah.
Number 6. Ancient seismograph. Zhang Heng, a Chinese astronomer and a mathematician born in 78 AD, created the world's first seismoscope in 132 AD, and it's absolutely weirdly gorgeous. I mean, look at this thing. So what would happen was, Heng figured this out, that when an earthquake hit, this pendulum inside the urn would move, as do most things during an earthquake, and in turn, when it picked up vibrations, it dropped a ball out of the mouth of the ancient metal dragon. The ball then falls into one of the mouths of a metal frog, making a beautiful but concerning clang sound. Now apparently the first time this happened, nobody even felt a thing, but days later, when a messenger finally arrived, it was then told that an earthquake did in fact happen. This type of ancient knowledge blows my mind. Like, this guy changed the world. Not too mysterious per se, but rather impressive how he was able to figure this out.
Number 5. Feet binding. Beauty is pain. Am I right? I know. We humans spend a lot of time trying to be attractive for one another, and in ancient China, tiny feet, they were awesome. The tinier the feet, the more attractive they were. With bound feet, a woman's beauty was enhanced. Some were even bound to be 10 centimeters in size. So small. It was also a status symbol because the rich didn't need to work, because as you can guess, having deformed feet prevented women from being able to leave the house. So if you were poor, you didn't bind your feet. It was a painful process. They would soak the feet in warm water mixed with herbs and animal blood. Then they would curl the toes over the sole of the foot and wrap it in cloth, breaking the toes and the arches so that it could be as small as possible. Oof. It wasn't until 1912 that it was actually banned.
Number 4. The number 4. Literally. Some numbers are quite lucky when it comes to Chinese culture. The number 8, for example, if you had an apartment on the 8th floor, it would sell for a higher price than that of the 7th. And no, it's not because 7, 8, 9, but rather because the number 8 is pronounced ba, which sounds familiar to fa, as in fakai, which translates to becoming rich or well off. The 2008 Beijing Olympics kicked off on August 8th at 8:08 p.m., 8 seconds in. It's a big deal still to this day, but the number 4, on the other hand, over here is even more unlucky than the number 13. It's bad juju, the number 4. It actually causes traffic to this day in Beijing. Let me explain. The number 4 sounds a lot like the word death, so buildings don't have this number as a floor even. It goes 2, 3, 5. Although if you're on floor 5, you know what's up. The traffic problem though, that's when it gets intense. See, Beijing has a vehicle plate program set in order to maintain the flow of traffic and also to help out with pollution. Depending on which numbers end in your plate, so on weekdays, private cars with plates ending in 2 digits, 0 to 9, are not allowed to drive in Beijing's 5th Ring Road all day. So if your number is on a certain day, you need to find another route to work. Makes sense. So the lucky numbers are used more often, which means more traffic on those days, but if you had a plate ending in 4, that's just 2% of all cars. You're flying to work. You're laughing on the way to work. It's easy. You're there in 2 minutes.
Number 3, terracotta warriors. Qin Shi Huang, who lived around 259 to 210 BCE, was not only an infamous conqueror in life, but he desired to be the same in death. He wanted to be immortalized, so he decided to build himself an immaculate tomb. It was basically an underground city guarded by the famous life-size terracotta warriors. But not only that, it was complete with gardens, stables, horses, bronze ritual vessels, jewelry, and heaps of treasure. This immaculate piece of art represented many of the ways in which the first emperor left an impression on his civilization. During his reign, he introduced standardized currency, writing, mathematical measurements, and plenty more. He was a military genius, though his methods were basically massacres. He was credited for unifying states together, but his underground city of immortality remains one of his most mysterious footprints he left, making sure the world never forgot him even thousands of years later.
Number 2. You're in trouble. We've done lists now on numerous ancient cultures and the way that they use their natural gift of water, berries. Romans would use their urine to wash their clothes, ancient Egyptians would pee on barley to predict a newborn sex. In ancient China, over 150 gallons of urine was often collected in this giant pan and then it was boiled until it evaporated. The result was something called autumn mineral, this crystallized urine residue that's later given to patients to consume. Yummy. Urine eggs were also a thing. That's when you boil an egg for an entire day in the not so mellow yellow. When it came down to smelling good in ancient China, the wealthy would wear scented bags, but if you weren't well off, you had to wash up with urine, just as the Romans did.
And last but not least, the lake of wine. A lake of wine? Sign me up! I'm in. I'm diving in. I prefer the grape variety, just like King Zhou. It's tough to be a king, but he was resolved to make sure he had a damn good time. He must have loved the OG charcuterie boards because this dude ordered the construction of a pool of wine and a forest of meat. What? A pool of wine I can imagine. A forest of meat? No idea. The pool was massive, big enough to fit several canoes. In the middle of the pool was a little island with a tree made out of skewers of meat. Creative. Zhao and his concubines would pass the time floating around the pool of wine, plucking off meat and living their best life. Sounds awesome. Honestly, I'd be in. However, his decadence didn't really please his people. Kind of like a Marie Antoinette deal, and they began uprising, and as soon as he realized this was happening, instead of addressing it, he set himself on fire. So I think his time can be summarized by Trooper, we're here for a good time, not for a long time.
Number 10. Tea. I honestly don't think I could make it through the day without a cup of tea in the morning. The Brit in me just can't do it. But I owe this to China. Specifically, I owe this to Chinese Empress Shennong from way back in 2737 BC. Now listen to this story. Once upon a time, Emperor Shennong liked to drink hot water. One day, while out on a march with his army, they stopped to rest and catch their breath. At the camp, a servant was preparing Shennong's hot water when a leaf from a tree fell and landed in the water, turning it brown. Instead of discarding the new liquid, it was presented to the emperor, who drank and found it refreshing. Boom! Tea. While used as medicine before this, in the Tang dynasty, it really became a common beverage enjoyed by many. This time period from 616 to 908 AD also saw the Book of Tea, written by Lu Yu, which contained ways to cultivate tea, tea drinking, and different classifications of tea in details. Thanks, Lu Yu. You the best.
Number 9, compass. A vast sea, all drunken sailors, and maybe Jack Sparrow, depending on how long the trial lasts. We'll see how it goes. The invention of the compass hails from the ancient land to the east. I learned again today. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Not me. Way back in the Han Dynasty, the first use of the compass was accomplished with a lodestone. For those who forgot what that was from their grade 4 museum field trip, tisk tisk. It will be on the test later, as well as some vocabulary in English. A lodestone is a naturally occurring magnet and aligns itself with the magnetic field, brother. While only used for land at first, it wasn't long before it made its way onto a boat, where it's speculated it was traded off into the Islamic world and eventually the West. My only experience with the compass was in Minecraft, and it doesn't point north, it points to spawn. Boy, did I learn the hard way.
Number 8. Movable type printing. Fun fact! The first book with a verifiable date of printing appeared in China in the year 868, or nearly 600 years before that happened in Europe. While the printing press would come much later in Europe, the idea of being able to print identical copies without handwriting began 2,000 years ago in the Western Han Dynasty. You see, before this point, if you wanted to pass on the good word of your religion, or teach somebody something, or tell somebody about the past, or give secret little I love you notes to each other, you had to either do it by word of mouth or handwriting. Gross. Then, in the previously mentioned Han Dynasty, people began stone tablet rubbing, which evolved into carving words and pictures onto a stone board, lathering that bad boy up with ink and pressing it onto paper. And boom, that's printing. But then, in 1041 to 1048, a guy named Bai Sheng carved characters on identical pieces of clay which he hardened by baking, resulting in pieces of movable type that could be stored and used again later. And now we have printers. Innovation, am I right?
Number 7. Gunpowder. Okay, sure, we all know what gunpowder is and what it does. After all, what's a soldier without his blam blam? A cowboy without his big iron, or a pirate ship without cannons? I'd argue those things are nothing without that. However, I'd like to think of a more peaceful use, and not just because YouTube sweats when I bring up pistols. I remember a long time ago where my father would get a bucket from the Shmome Depot. He'd fill it up with sand, and we'd walk to a secluded part of the suburban area and launch fireworks. Sometimes we'd launch them into the streets, but that depended on how much rye he had. Depends. At least there was a bucket. Safety first, right? Well, none of that would have been possible without the invention from China. Gunpowder was invented by Chinese alchemists in the 9th century. Originally, it was made by mixing elemental sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter, potassium nitrate. The charcoal traditionally came from the willow tree, but grapevine, hazel, elder laurel, and pine cones have all been used in the process.
Number 6. Deep drilling. The province of Sichuan in ancient China, yes, like the sauce, was landlocked and about 1,200 miles from the sea. Because of that, they ain't got no sea salt. So, in order to get salt, the ancient Chinese from around the 2nd century BC developed drilling technology to get brine from deep in the earth, which naturally forms from evaporation of ground saline water. Look at that, we're all learning today. Salt is obviously quite an important resource, but the boring and drilling technology only got better and better, resulting in more and more resources to be found, like natural gas, which could be used as fuel. And in the 11th century, the Chinese had the technology to be able to drill those suckers up to 3,000 feet deep, which is pretty deep in case you did not know.
Number 5. Silk. I, for one, was always too broke to afford silk, especially after fireworks. Those bad boys are super expensive. Silk was an important thing in ancient China for the main reason that they invented the process of harvesting silk and were keeping it an ancient Chinese secret. Now, when you have a stockpile of a very valuable raw material that nobody else can get their hands on, and you have a stockpile of the finished product of which is a quality of clothing no one else can match, well, you're gonna be quite wealthy. Well, I don't need to pitch this in the Shark Tank. It's time to start selling and trading, and that's just what China did. This was a very profitable trade, so it got its own road, or roads. The Silk Road wasn't just one. The people who were buying from China loved it so much they wanted their own instead of paying exuberant prices. But it took them a long time to figure out what the process actually was. They thought it grew on trees. It comes from
Number 4. Acupuncture. Have you ever had acupuncture done? Have you ever had acupuncture done?
I've done.
Neither have I. Let us know in the comments. I want to know if it actually works. When I was looking up this topic, it was called pseudoscience and said that there was no actual scientific proof that it works. Whether it does or doesn't, the practice of acupuncture is ancient. We know this from a less ancient book called the Neijing that was written around 305 BC to 204 BC and was the earliest book of Chinese medicine we know of. It was also called the Classic of Internal Medicine of the Yellow Emperor. Who was the Yellow Emperor? Well, that would be Huang Di, whose period lasted from 2697 to 2597 BC. And this guy, this emperor, revolutionized the practice of acupuncture. So all of that was a very long-winded way of saying that acupuncture as a practice has been around for more than 4,722 years. Look, writing videos is hard, okay? Just give me a break.
Number 3, earthquake detector. Earthquakes are a big problem. It's an issue in California as they're still waiting for the big one. It's a problem in Pokemon, when the gym leader I thought was going to be easy surprised me with an earthquake and like one-shots my team. And it was a problem in ancient China. I've already experienced one before myself in real life, and if I had to describe to anyone what it felt like the ground was a waterbed. Some of you are probably not going to know what a waterbed is, but that's what it felt like. Well, it was so much of an issue that Zhang Heng made the groundbreaking invention of a seismometer, a device that can detect ground movement. It can't predict them, but it can tell you where they're coming from, using vibrations and tiny balls that would fall into frog-shaped cups depending on which direction it was coming from. Something that goes hand in hand with the compass from earlier. Interesting.
Number 2, beer. First tea, now beer? Oh, wait, no. First beer. The earliest recorded consumption of beer was in China 9,000 years ago. I could kiss these people. 2 of my favorite beverages. That's it, I'm moving back in time to ancient China. Only this beer wasn't exactly the same as the kind of beer we would think of made of barley. They used rice, hawthorn, honey, and grapes to make their beer. This 4 or 5% alcohol was mentioned in inscriptions from the Shang dynasty, so that would be 1600 BC to 1046 BC. But pottery from around 7000 BC contains traces of this same kind of alcohol. That's before even the Egyptian pharaohs. And 3,500 to 4,000 years before the Sumerians created the Western modern-day interpretation of beer. The liquid was known as zhu in Chinese and is often used as a spiritual offering to the heavens and the earth or to ancestors. And you know what? It still is, baby.
Number 1, paper money. The Jiaozi currency was the first time in history we used paper money. The stacks, the wad, the dough, the shkarol, the Benjamins, the Bordens, dead presidents, and the bread. There's no greater feeling than walking into a mall with a wad of cash, is there? JCPenney, here I come. Well, we have ancient China to thank for that. Well, sort of. Coins and metal were still more common and used for hundreds of more years before we started printing. In reality, the paper makes more sense. Before printing, coins could have been manipulated into making doubles or counterfeit. There wasn't a press yet, but with paper, it could be issued certain identifiers and used for certain things. The problem with the Jiaozi money is that it wasn't backed by anything, so it did cause a little bit of what my generation knows too much, inflation.